Kirby Smart just needs to quiet down the conversation out there that he's not a great on the field coach. That quote from Paul Feinbaum earlier this year, talking about Georgia's coming into fifth year coach, Kirby Smart. Excuse me, is this sixth year? I'm getting the time runs together after all of these years with Kirby Smart, who started in 2016. Is Paul Feinbaum right? I mean, there's certainly been plenty of times when you watch Georgia and you wonder what Kirby's doing, like you wonder what head coaches do sometimes. Here's the quote one more time. Kirby Smart just needs to quiet down the conversation out there that he's not a great on the field coach. I think a lot of that conversation comes from people who are sort of fans. Um, I also would suggest to you that beyond Nick Saban, who are we talking about that's a great on the field coach? Dabo? Les Miles? Gene Chizik? Um, what about Ed Orgeron? I mean, that stuff, either you win it all or you don't. And even sometimes when you win it all, there's criticisms to be had. And I think that's the big thing is that conversation out there. Well, I mean, that conversation is people like me and Paul and everybody else in the media talking about it. Doesn't mean it's really reality. I do think there are some curious things that Kirby has done, but the fact of the matter is, and Paul talks about this during his conversation with a local Birmingham station too, which is that the numbers don't lie. He has won a pile of games, and the person that he lost to this past year that everyone sort of anoints as a great on the field coach is Dan Mullen. That's the first time Dan Mullen's won in his division in over 10 years of being a head coach in the SEC. And we say, well, Mississippi State shouldn't win the division. Well, all right, but you know, Missouri shouldn't win it, and they did. So I don't know. I think sometimes it's easy to get a narrative about a coach, and you just drive it into the ground. I mean, the big thing about Nick Saban forever was that this guy, he has these great recruiting classes, and that's why they win. Yeah, that's why they win. That's not the only reason they win. I mean, Alabama does a great job of development. Clemson does a great job of development. But there's different things at work. And that's what I think people get so wrong. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why Dabo Swinney has had great success at Clemson. A lot of it revolves around the fact that he's a great fit at Clemson, and Clemson is a great fit in the league that they play in. Could you do some of that stuff that he tries to pull at Florida State or Alabama or Georgia? No, you couldn't. You can't be that style of coach. At Georgia, what works is what Kirby's been doing, which is recruiting. I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't have the kids, it doesn't matter how great an on the field coach you are. We heard this forever about Mark Fox. And the fact of the matter was, he was not pulling the kids in. What will happen here eventually is either Kirby will win the national championship, and people will say this, but they won't say it as often, or he won't win the national championship, and people will beat this down his throat. That you lost an SEC championship game to an Alabama team that went on to play for the national championship, that you lost an SEC championship game to what people felt like is the greatest college football team of all time. Um, I mean, there's criticisms to be had of Kirby Smart. I can go through them right here. At the end of the Cincinnati game, that was a curious coaching decision in terms of time. But that was something he really felt like he needed to follow what he believed in, which is analytics, and that it would pay off in the end. Well, it did. It just wasn't pretty. Same thing the game before, not a week before, against Missouri. They call a timeout with, I don't know, it was like 50 seconds left maybe in the half with Missouri knocking on the door. Well, that made more sense. But some people may have tried to, force a field goal from Missouri, running the clock down. He wanted to go score again. So I think, too, what we're seeing with Kirby that we're definitely not seeing with Nick Saban, and it was very hidden at Clemson when Clemson wasn't doing anything, was the development of the head coach. Um, the thing about it is, very few people talk about the struggles that Nick Saban had when he was at Michigan State. I mean, almost no one, I know Clemson pretty well, talks about Dabo's struggle against South Carolina, the beating they took against West Virginia, the Clemsoning, the random stuff, because that stuff doesn't happen anymore. That's the difference. But those coaches weren't developing in the limelight. Kirby Smart got Georgia to the national championship game like on game 29 or whatever it was of his career. I mean, that's not common. Game 29, I can go back and look, but I'm sure Dabo was playing like NC State or something like that. Or Nick was playing, well, he was the coach at Toledo before that. So these coaches develop in different ways. That doesn't mean, I mean, that with that said, they have to develop. We all do. And that's the part where I think people at Georgia are saying, hey, look, he's not perfect, um, but he's winning a lot more than most people have here in a long time. And we really feel like we're right on top of this thing. I think that thinking is correct. I mean, who would you rather switch places with besides Nick Saban? Would you rather have Dabo Swinney? I don't think Dabo Swinney would work at Georgia. That all shucks stuff, it ain't going to work at Georgia. It's just not going to work at Georgia. That's North Carolina, Clemson stuff. That's not going to work at Georgia. Um, you know, uh, the coach at Oklahoma, I mean, he's offensive innovator. They don't stop any. I mean, you can pick holes in anybody that's not Nick Saban. And by the way, a year ago this time, people were asking if Alabama was dead, which was a ridiculous statement and commentary. Ohio State, would you rather be Ryan Day? He's in year two, if I'm not mistaken, and got blown out in the national championship game. I'm not sure if that makes it better to lose the national championship game by, 4 touchdowns or whatever it was rather than a point or 3 points on the last play of the game. Kirby's got to improve on what he's got to improve on. I do think the time management is one thing. I think organizationally, he's never had a problem. He is as detailed. He is as detailed a person I've seen in coaching since, I mean, probably Vince. My college coach was extremely detailed. It didn't help us win as many games. Got people like me playing, you know. So Kirby can match. Me not playing very often, thank God for us. But Kirby can match his attention to detail with growing as a coach. That's going to be the biggest thing in the recruiting. Um, no one recruits like Kirby outside of Nick. I mean, Clemson does not recruit like Georgia. They don't. Um, Ohio State is in the same breath too. But all of these programs I'm mentioning, Oklahoma, Clemson, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, that group, generally speaking, I think there is a void between them and the next tier, which would be like LSU, Florida. I mean, if you want to put Auburn in there, that Texas, that there is a group that is that essentially has won well, Oklahoma hadn't done this yet, but has won a playoff game. I do think there's a difference between those schools and the other schools. A lot of it is recruiting, but let's not lie. I mean, Clemson and Oklahoma are not playing the same situation as Georgia and Alabama or even Ohio State. They're just not. So it's not the same, but they get credit for having success because they're learning in their league. Dabo Swinney's shtick works at Clemson. It would probably also work at Auburn. I'm not sure it would work anywhere else in the SEC. What Nick does, that would not work at Virginia or maybe even not Tennessee, but it's a perfect match at Alabama. What Georgia's got to do is go out and find the right coach. They think they've done that with Kirby Smart, and then they've got to let him develop this thing. This is a really good 2021 Georgia team. I'm not sure we should be penalizing Georgia every single time they don't win the national championship. That's getting a little ridiculous. I mean, do we do that with Oklahoma? Because it doesn't feel like we do. Do we do that with Ohio State? Because Ryan Day's not won a national championship. And I think sometimes we get narratives that get overplayed, and this is what we do. Those of us in the media, this is what we do. But fans do it too, and it's probably it's something we talk about at Dog Post constantly. If you're watching this, you remember Dog Post, you know what I'm talking about. But there are a lot of things Kirby's got to fix. I'm not sure they're as pronounced, perhaps, as what Paul is saying, because I think if you're a coach, you do dumb stuff sometimes, just like quarterbacks throw interceptions and do dumb things. People don't understand a lot of the minutia that Kirby's dealt with in terms of the quarterbacks. that's something for another time to talk about. It's something we talk about over on Dog Post all the time. I want to make sure to see you over on the website. We'll see you there. Dean Legge for Dog Post, making you a smarter Georgia fan.